session. So
I
thank
turned
you
on
for all coming and being flexible and stuff. It's perfect.
So Charlene, would you like to just say a few words and then we'll get going about where we are in the festival? Or
Oh, yes. So at the festival today, they'll be doing morning sessions, and then they're going to go into Winnipeg, and I think they'll all be bussed in, and I don't know if anybody knew about this, but there was a performance of Parsival that was to be at the Museum of Human Rights, which was double booked. And so they ended up in the past week rescheduling it to the Mennonite University in Winnipeg. So it's everything about this festival has seemed to be shifting and moving as we went along doing it. And that is still in process, and this is part of that, where we're meeting at a time that wasn't previously scheduled, but we can record it. We'll be able to watch it again. I'll send everyone links. And I just thank you so much, Andrew, for coming again today, so we can hear your words. And I think that is what I can tell you.
So I just want to start out. This is sometimes a very difficult talk I'm going to do. We might say, in part due to Waldorf schools correctly wanting to protect children, that a kind of attitude towards technology developed within anthroposophy, that technology is akin to evil. A technology is something to be avoided, and technology won't do any good. And this conference being That Good May Becom, I felt that it was probably appropriate that we actually try to deal with what anthroposophy's grasp or understanding of technology actually is, rather than what has become a kind of mythology about technology. So I'm going to start with a slide presentation on this, specifically for this group. And we have 90 minutes minus a few. And I'll take probably 50 minutes in the presentation, and then we'll have a discussion afterwards. But I think the presentation can create a foundation for the conversation that we can have following. So I'm going to do what's called a screen share. And at the moment, you're going to see something. Okay, and now I will start the presentation. So now you see the opening slide here, and just make one other adjustment here. So in this talk, we're going to look at both the near future and the future that I'd say covers our next 4 to 6 incarnations. As a warning, this is not a talk to say all is good and now you can go back to sleep. Steiner called the future I'm about to reveal the terrible truth that we must not only get to know, but also to help the spiritual world to prepare for it. So what does anthroposophy know about technology? Let's distinguish between anthroposophy and anthroposophists. Many anthroposophists have been concerned about the impact technology will have on our humanness. And I can't say they're wrong to have concern. But to grasp tech, there are many ways that anthroposophy can help. One that I'm listing here is what are the gods' involvement? And we can peek at mythology to help us. And these stories include that of Hephaestus and Prometheus. And as you know, Prometheus, who gave to humanity the arts and sciences, was thereby chained to the mineral kingdom. And we also know that those chains were built by the god of technology, Hephaestus. And Hephaestus, whose name in Latin is Vulcan, was the first god born with a deformed, well, he had a deformed foot. So he was the first god that had something ugly. And that's a very interesting word, if we can remember ugly coming with technology. But it's his foot, it's where he stands on the earth. But because he had this ugly foot, his mother Hera found him so despicable, so unworthy of being her child, that she threw him off of Mount Olympus, and he comes down to earth, to the island of Lemnos, which had a volcano. So through Hephaestus, we can say that Prometheus and all learns about fire. And Prometheus, though, has to be chained, and to be unchained, he needs Heracles to become godlike by performing 12 deeds or 12 labors, and 12 obviously for each of the signs of the zodiac. But even that's not enough. To be fully released, his inner animal, his Chiron, the centaur, had to be sacrificed. With all of this, eventually Hephaestus is invited back to the home of the gods. And to do so, he rode on a donkey. And so I invite you to picture that similarly to how Christ Jesus rode into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. We could also look at the elementals, because elementals are involved in all that we see. And so they are also involved in technology. Higher beings had to use elementals. In fact, they're called their offspring. For them to work upon the physical realm, they needed elementals. They can't do it themselves. So behind this Maya, behind what we see with our physical eyes, is a world that we could say is the world of the elemental beings. There's an individual from Norway, Are Thoresen, who has described, and I'm not trying to promote him here, but I think it's quite interesting what he's had to say, that in Steiner's time, the third kingdom, or where the elementals of nature are found, this was opened in 1879. It had been opened much earlier, but had closed during the years when the spiritual world was closed to humanity. And that began in the year 1250. The second kingdom, he said, opened in 1949, 70 years later, and 70 years after that. In 2019, the first kingdom opened. And you can see the beings, Ahrimanic and Azoric elementals. Given that all these higher beings, the elementals are offsprings of these higher beings, Ahrimanic and Azoric can also create these elemental beings. The closer we come to the earth, the more multiplicity reigns, such as in gnomes. And the more we move towards the ethers, the more unity reigns in these elemental beings. So we get the concept of monotheism by rising up to the elementals above. We know about a being called Ahriman. And some of you may know that there is an Ahrimanic double that we each have. And I'll talk more about that. We know that Ahriman is to incarnate, quote, early in the third millennium, unquote. And that this plus his preparations will have a dramatic impact on our experience within the physical realm. I mentioned an Ahrimanic double, and now a few more words about this, that this Ahrimanic double joins us before birth and stays with us throughout our life within our subconscious, within the physical body. And it leaves just before death. And some have surmised that that lucid moment one has before death is when this Ahrimanic double has left. During the time, and I'll talk a little more about this, when we were coming to fully incarnate into physical bodies, these bodies were worked upon by the Ahrimanic double. And so what we have in our bodies of electromagnetism is from this double. You must, as this picture denotes, realize that you sit in the throne of consciousness, of day consciousness, and that this double, as well as our Luciferic double that we also have, but in our time frame, the Ahrimanic double predominates, but both of these doubles are whispering to us whenever we are deliberating on a decision to make. Do it this way. No, do it that way. Everything of the nature of withdrawing and protecting ourselves from influences of all that we necessarily have to encounter as world karma, all that sensation of withdrawing arises out of a soul weakness. I'm going to quote Steiner from Art as Seen in the Light of Modern Mystery Wisdom. He says, Anthroposophy can strengthen the human soul, or Gemut, and thus develop those forces that inwardly strengthen and arm us against the influences from modern times. Therefore, never within the compass of our spiritual movement could any kind of recommendation be given to cut oneself off from modern life or to turn spiritual life into a kind of cultural hothouse. This could never apply in the realm of true spiritual culture. Although it is understandable that weaker natures prefer to withdraw from modern life and go into some Essene-like settlement where they are out of reach of modern times, the fact remains that this arises not from strength, but from weakness of soul. Our task, however, consists in strengthening our soul life by permeating ourselves with the impulses of spiritual science and spiritual research. So this is a picture of our Earth evolution divided into 7 epochs. We are now in the 5th of these epochs. And each of these epochs have 7 cultural ages. So I'll return to this chart again. But it's important to ask yourself, what future do you want? Is it a heaven on earth? Is it where peace and prosperity reign? Will there be full employment? And will everyone be loving nature and fully respectful of it? We must be careful that our picture is not clouded by our sympathies and antipathies, but that we take clearly the divine picture of evolution to heart. Some pictures of the future are whispered to us by Lucifer, and some by our Ahrimanic double, such as, me and my family, what I want for the future, for me and my family to be secure and financially set, or no one or no government challenges my freedom. I will be able to enjoy all the riches and pleasures of life. and I will live a long life. Hey, maybe forever. So, what is the point of this divinely planned evolution? Do we come to glorify God and live happily ever after, or to become something we're not yet? Is evolution only for us humans, or could other higher beings need this evolution just as we do? So I drew a picture here I included a picture here that Steiner drew of evolution. You can see it rising and then falling. And the fall can be actually slower or faster, just as a plant goes through an annual plant, a rise and a fall. So does our human evolution as a being go through its growth and then its old age and decline, which you see here, the growth and decay through the different epochs. And it's important to say that each epoch has a task, and each age also has a task, and each generation has a task. Spiritual impulses from earlier epochs must be resolved in later ones. The impulses, thus, from the Lemurian epoch must be resolved in this, the fifth epoch. Similarly, when we get to the sixth and seventh epochs, there will be things to be resolved. Now, one example is that of sexual procreation that began during the Lemurian epoch after the moon withdrew. So this must come to a culmination, a conclusion in this fifth epoch. Who is going to get this done? Humanity today is but children being asked to grow up. For our future evolution, the divine beings need spiritual scientists like you to volunteer to bring about the divinely intended future that you heard Rudolf Steiner called the terrible truth. Since we attained our freedom, how can the divine world anymore steer evolution? So if you bring up the word duty, isn't that a bad word? You got to be kidding me, Andrew. We worked hard for our freedom. Duty only applies to the military. Think about the expression in the Lord's Prayer, thy will be done. When we take this up, are we taking it up as a duty out of our freedom? So I'd like to just point us to a couple differences in Lucifer's picture of the future and Ahriman's, where Lucifer would say, come on up here. It's full of bliss and it's all yuck down there. And up here, you will be moral. Yes, you would be moral automatons, not out of freedom. And he brings to us the full wisdom, but a wisdom of old moon. Whereas Ahriman says, be here now. This is all that matters. There's only one reality here in the physical. Everything else you don't know about, it's sure new age fluff. So be intelligent automatons, and be powerful. Don't let anybody push you around. Today, humanity is working upon the consciousness soul. We need to understand what this entails. How do we develop it? The real battle of our times is an inner battle. Out of inner victory, of overcoming selfishness, can brotherly love properly evolve. We see here the condition before the activity of Christ. That is, as we now confront Lucifer and Ahriman, they leave no space for Christ within us. But if we Christianize what we meet in the world, when one can truly say, Christ in me, then one can inwardly separate Lucifer and Ahriman. even in the technology that we meet. This would be the after. As on Golgotha, Christ here forms a trinity with Lucifer and Ahriman. This active trinity we must recognize in the world as well as in us. This staff of Mercury is the sign of healing, with Christ as the healer. Now, a lot of people I hear today when I talk to them about technology are all, oh, there's so many problems that we face. Yeah, there are a lot of problems that we face. So we're going to be born in a future when we will have to deal with the messes that we've left behind, just as we've left behind in the past. So are we living in the most dangerous of times? AI comes to us, Chat GPT, transhumanism, globalism, technocracy, and many other pictures of a future dystopia prevail. Perhaps being a Cathar in 1176 would be in the top 10 of dangerous times. Cathars believed one could purify their astral body through a catharsis. Steiner, by the way, calls the purified astral body the Virgin Sophia. These Cathars carried John's gospel with them. They were pacifists. So when they were declared to be heretics and the Pope endorsed a crusade against them, it was relatively easy to wipe them out. But sympathizers remained. Thus, the infamous Inquisition resulted from the church's attempt to eradicate all sympathizers as well. And then, of course, the Inquisition spread throughout Europe. So when we understand evolution, we can better understand our own times and our own challenges. Upon crossing the threshold, 3 members of the human being, namely spirit, soul, and body, split up just as thinking, feeling, and willing become separate entities. So what I'm trying to point out here is part of the dangerous times we're living in is the fact that humanity as a whole is now crossing the threshold. And this takes us into new realities and new dangers. Now, I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit to our modern times that I tried to introduce with crossing the threshold. And you can see the text there, 80 to 90% of those who are able to work will be jobless within the next 100 years. What this tells us is the importance of bringing about threefolding as soon as possible. There will be social pain and upheavals. People are crying out already, death to the elites, death to the technocrats, just as Bolshevism did a little over 100 years ago. Death of innovation will come about because we are reaching a time when robotics and so on will be making all of the products that we consume. And there will be less push towards innovation that will come about through this. But this is a necessary process to help us remove ourselves gradually from the physical realm. But what does it mean to us as soul beings? It does affect how we assess ourselves. Massive change will come about, but we are already seeing questions about how do we find truth. And so we are finding that governments, such as in China, are already offering something like a character coding of individuals. And this may come about as a credit rating, which we have that follows us around through life. So we will end up through Chat GPT and AI coming to more and more a focus on our individual and collective morality. So I asked the question, for this future, is universal basic income sufficient? And remember, we are crossing the threshold as a whole, entering new ground, new territory, where an enhanced interest in the spiritual is necessary. Now, I brought up AI and this future of jobs. Let me read a few modern quotes. AI won't replace you. Someone using AI will. Another, AI eliminated nearly 4,000 jobs in May, and not in the quotes here, another 8,000 in IBM in June. AI could take the jobs of as many as 1 billion people globally and make 375 million jobs obsolete in the next decade. And Goldman Sachs estimates 300 million jobs could be lost by 2029, and over 50 million Chinese workers requiring retraining as a result of the deployment of AI. So, obviously, this is a bad thing, or is it? Does it challenge us to take the necessary steps in evolution, such as threefolding? Now, I'd like us to take a look at the jobs that technology has already taken over. So here is a factory full of women, a textile factory. Imagine this. It might have been the job your grandmother had. Imagine this for your 8 to 5 job. And if you hated this work back then, your only hope was to get married. These men also had 8 to 5 jobs. Not exactly the same, certainly a different pay scale. Would you say these jobs were dominated by Ahriman or by Lucifer? Was there any space here for the Christ? Here's another set of jobs that technology has taken over, the switchboard operator. Today, the switchboard done by technology has a built-in kind of artificial intelligence. So the question is, now that those jobs and future jobs will be taken over by robotics, what are we going to do with our free time? I once worked a summer job with a company called Motor Wheel. I worked third shift, and all those jobs, they're all gone, these blue-collar jobs in the auto industry. There's probably only a few hundred jobs left in this factory that once employed many thousands of people. Again, is that a bad thing? Or in terms of human evolution, is this a good thing that people are not doing repetitive work for 40 years of their lives? So I mentioned that the future is making our consumables and even delivering them done by robots. Here is a factory making computer chips, and you see the three in the middle have a wafer from which these chips will be made. And notice their outfits to work in this factory. What does it look like? Looks a little bit to me like outer space outfits. And that's because they do not want the earthly element inside, or it will contaminate the products being made. So what does freedom from work look like? Or shall we just say freedom from Ahriman's work? Will we develop a new type of work? What does it mean for salary? What does it mean for spiritual work? Will we take up the study and practice of spiritual science? Not only do we face the dangers of artificial intelligence, but transhumanism also challenges us to ask, what is the human being? It asks us to think of the human being as a biological machine, the brain as a biocomputer. And if so, then boy, we should do this, because biohumans are fragile, and given climate change and everything else, there's no way we're going to survive. So we should definitely move into becoming advanced robotic humans, right? So transhumanism has argued for years that our model of the human being, our Darwinian model, means that we will have to recreate ourselves in order to survive. And there's lots of books that have been out for a decade just about on this. You can see these names of these books here by different authors, and more keep arriving that keep envisioning this future that people like Ray Kurzweil, who's perhaps the best known name here, talks about this transcend our biology by merging with non-biological systems. So what would Steiner say about that? Oh my goodness. Steiner said, the welding together of human beings with machines will be a great and important problem for the rest of Earth evolution. Oh, and Ray said, the merging of our biological thinking and existence with our technology. And Steiner said, man will chain a second being to him. This is our double. And feel the urge to think materialistic thoughts, to think not through his own being, but through the second being who is his companion. And this goes on and on and on about things that have similarities. But the conundrum for transhumanism is what Steiner said, we must build this middle realm, because for them, love, this gemut, this warmth of soul, is something they can't understand. So when we look, and I'm sorry, this picture is a little bit blurry, we see that there is in us an apparent polarity between Lucifer and Ahriman, creating thoughts in our own personal philosophy of dualism. Two delusional images of ourselves, the Ahrimanic and the physical corporeal, and the Luciferic and our soul spiritual. But between that is the human archetype that we must give room to in our hearts and soul. The temptation brought us to fall into matter, and in so doing, death was added to help humanity. Lemuria was the start of coming to a kind of incarnation, not yet a physical body. That did not happen until the Atlantean times, that we began to have sexual procreation and stepped out upon solid land. Before that, we were in something that bodily was probably more like a jellyfish. And as we fell from Eden to earth, the double was working upon the body that we would come into, bringing into it birth and death, and bringing electricity and magnetism within it. And this little chart shows us how electricity was once outside of us, but through that crossing point, as we came to Earth, then it moved inside of us. In the future, when we go through that crossing point again, it will move outside of us. Well, we've reached that crossing point. It happened in the 20th century. It happened in the expanded in the 20th century. It happened in the 19th century when we went through this through the discovery of electricity and beginning to use it, but we have the wrong concept of electricity. We still have the wrong concept working with us and in us. And until we come to the right concept, electricity's role was to be the carrier of death. But because of the wrong concept, we have allowed it to become the carrier of evil. When we come to the right concept is when we begin to be able to overcome evil. And I just want to mention, with the withdrawal of the moon during the Lemurian epoch, then came the separation of the sexes. So this little sequence here, we'll give that to you. Here, Lemuria, the moon separated. Then we went into the Atlantean and now the post-Atlantean cultural ages. We are now in the 5th post-Atlantean cultural age, and in the 7th, the moon will return. And then we go into the 6th epoch and 7th epoch. And just as a comment, it's been unfortunate, but Steiner in many lectures uses the term cultural ages. In a few lectures, he uses the term cultural epoch, meaning cultural age. And many a translator has been fooled by this. And so we have even titles preparing for the 6th epoch incorrectly labeled. They should be preparing for the 6th cultural age. So when the moon withdrew, as I said, the sexes also separated. Before that, we were androgynous beings. All of our offspring were clones of us. So the years of Adam is said to be 900 and some years, and so were all of the others. This would be the time in which the clone identified with Adam, or whoever was the father of that clone, or the, I can't say father, the father, mother of that clone. So now we're in a period of time where every 300 years, the soul-body interaction is getting 1 year less. In Christ's time, the soul-body interaction lasted up until the age of 33. Today, it's 27. In the future, this will eventually fall all the way down to 14, at which point puberty will no longer happen. So you see then that women will cease to be fertile. And then, as Steiner says, an entirely different form of living on the earth will thus come about. We shall be connected with the earth in a way other than through birth. And you can find that in lecture 14 of Materialism and the Task of Anthroposophy. So I have to bring back this diagram again and say that just as in the second half of Old Moon, we are now in the second half of Earth evolution. And so in the second half of Old Moon, those who are going to be on the human stage of Earth came into the domain of the Earth, of the humans of Old Moon. And we were now on the human stage of Earth, were a nuisance to those who are on the human stage of Old Moon. Those who are on the human stage of Old Moon are now our angels. We will have a similar relationship to those who will be on the human stage of the next planetary condition, whose esoteric name is Jupiter. So here's a quote from Steiner from Michael's task in the sphere of Ahriman, a letter to the members. Whatever Michael performs is performed in such a way as to exert no influence from his part upon mankind, who is free to follow him, and if so, in freedom, with the Christ power, to find our way out again from Ahriman's sphere, which we have entered of necessity. So back to this question about transhumanism and AI. What are we to do in our times? One option is to reject it, to fight against it, to stop it now. Another is to accept it because it will help human evolution. Another option is to become neo-Amish, to just withdraw and let people have it, but not us. Another is to find the Christ path, the divine path of human evolution. So these views of transhumanism and anthroposophy on the surface, I tried to show, have some similarities, but of course, underneath, they are quite different. One is based on materialism and leads in its vision to a golden era of transhumanism. The other sees a spiritual science as where the truth can be found. And as civilization goes into this decline from this current cultural age onwards, this element has to come in again so that catastrophe must be brought about. Human beings must use these powers themselves. Ahrimanic doubles, as we'll talk about in a moment, are therefore an iron necessity. But as civilization goes into its decline and catastrophe must be brought about, we find that we are like compost, going to use this destruction to bring about the next step forward in civilization. And this is when Steiner, one of the times he says, this is a terrible truth, but nothing will avail where this truth is concerned, but to get to know it, to see it clearly, and then to prepare it. So I'm going to mention this Ahrimanic double because we do need to know about this double. And if we go back to Eden, we go back to the time of Adam and Eve, and we can't think of them as just individuals, but all of their clones and offspring. And so what happens? Lucifer, bringing his unfinished work from Old Moon to Earth as a laggard being, but full of the beauty and wisdom of Old Moon, and wanting to give that to humanity, tempts us to come to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And so when we ate upon this fruit, the gods knew we were capable now of becoming like them, of knowing about good and evil. And so to help us get there, to prepare us, we had to fall to earth from Eden. And so another being had to be brought in to our evolution to prepare all of this and to balance out in our evolution the deed of Lucifer, and that was Ahriman. Ahriman was not part of the divine being's plan. Those divine beings being the Elohim or Exousiai, the spirits of form that lead earth evolution. Ahriman would go back to Old Sun, before Old Moon, when the leading beings were the Kyriatides, the spirits of wisdom. So the fall allowed this double to prepare. Now they wanted to conquer the earth. They wanted physical bodies because the physical is the realm they wish to conquer. So that's important to consider. Now, I'm going to draw a timeline for you here of the cultural ages of the rest of this fifth epoch. And you see the dates here. You see in our time, the fifth post-Atlantean cultural age, we're working on the consciousness soul. Next, we will work on spirit self, known as Manas. We won't complete that until Jupiter, and we won't complete Buddhi until the future planetary condition called Venus. So that's, you can't even put it in years out there. But we will be working upon the seed of these because there's elements of this that are necessary for our Earth evolution. You can see that the sixth is called the Russian or Slavic cultural age, when brotherhood is developed. And then finally, the American, which is to bring about closure to the fifth epoch. Here we are. And coming in the not too distant future is Ahriman's incarnation. I put it here at 2233 when Erithiel, who followed Michael as time spirit, will be ruling. And I think Ahriman wishes to have his incarnation when Erithiel is the time spirit. And this will be an incarnation in the flesh, just as Christ and Lucifer have before him. But although in the flesh, I think he is wanting to prepare the brain-computer interface as well as prostheses. So after the seventh post-Atlantean cultural age comes the sixth epoch that you see here in green. And by the start of the sixth, you must realize we will no longer have a physical existence. So here's Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, the goal of the Russian Slavic work. And out here, you see a war of all against all. How is that possible? How can we go from Philadelphia to a war of all against all? That just doesn't seem to make any sense. Well, it does make sense when you realize that during the sixth Paka, it will not be all of humanity that enjoys Philadelphia. Steiner said it will be a small group, and he cannot reveal how they will know each other because it will be worldwide, this group. But just as the Atlantean epic came to an end, the fifth also must come to an end. And just as in Atlantis, it was from the fifth cultural age that the survivors came for this epoch we've been in, it will be from the sixth, the next after the fifth, the sixth cultural age, that survivors will take us into the sixth epoch. It will not be from the seventh. The seventh brings to a close. So here at near the end of the sixth is also the end of Christ in the etheric. It's also the end of when sexual procreation has been occurring. And it's also the time of the Maitreya Buddha. What does the Maitreya Buddha have to do? Well, some of us have a wrong notion that procreation at this time will just continue out of the larynx. This is an anthroposophical myth. It's not the case. That will not happen until the last planetary condition of Vulcan. Yes, in Jupiter, the larynx, the etheric larynx, will be able to create the plant members of the plant kingdom. And in the next planetary condition, Venus, the astral larynx will be able to create animals. So the Maitreya Buddha, when the Maitreya Buddha appears, he will be able to touch the preserved remains of Kashyapa with his right hand, causing this corpse to be transported in a spiritual fire, the same fire that was made manifest to Paul on the road to Damascus. This fire will rescue for future times all that was great and noble in this fifth epoch. In the spiritualized fire in which Christ appeared to Paul, the body of Kashyapa, untouched by corruption, will be saved through the Maitreya Buddha. This is a picture of our ascension that begins then. The Maitreya Buddha opens the door for our ascension out of the physical and into the etheric, of which we will have already become accustomed to living in our etheric body. The characteristic feature of the cultural age of this cultural age we're in, the consciousness soul development, is each of our isolation. That one is inwardly isolated from one's neighbor is the consequence of individuality and the development of personality. But this separative tendency, we must develop its reciprocal pole, its counterbalance, which is the cultivation of an active concern for our neighbor, the development of agape love. So coming back to this, we see here the development of a new physical body. How is that going to happen? Well, Steiner mentions that it will happen through our association with the fallen spirits of darkness that happened in 1879, and with the help of the gods of technology, the Vulcan beings, who also began to arrive in 1879 as a counterbalance to those angels of darkness. In the end of the seventh post-Atlantean cultural age, there will arise what's Steiner called a brood of spidery beings that will cover the earth. I liken these to being what will be given to our Ahrimanic doubles, what they have desired in conquering the physical earth, which these spidery beings will do. But there's a problem. A third of the world of humanity will be able to ascend there at the end of the sixth post-Atlantean cultural age. Another third will be able to during the seventh cultural age, but another third will not be able to. They will have to fall with the Ahrimanic double because they are unable to leave the physical realm. Then, to ensure all of this is cleaned up and completed, the moon returns. Imagine the moon returning to the earth, what it would do when a simple small asteroid wiped out all of the life of the dinosaurs. Now, in this seventh cultural age, Steiner described what that would be like. It will be as if the human body were here on the earth and the human being above will make use of it from outside like a vehicle. We will no longer bear our body about and live within it, but we will float above it. Throughout this seventh cultural age, there will come about an evil race, and it will come about out of their own freedom. All people will have both good and evil tendencies within them. But without spiritual science, the choice of the good will become difficult, more and more difficult. For in the future, what is called the good will be called evil, and what is evil will be called the good. It will be those who were unable to leave materialism behind who will become this evil race. To quote Steiner, it will lie entirely within the individual as to whether their soul will remain in the evil race or will ascend by spiritual culture to the good race. This is the separation of the seventh cultural age. So you've heard it called the terrible truth that must be known. So I've tried to cover some of the important points related to technology, such as Ahriman's incarnation and the preparations he is doing now, which are in the field of technology. But that should not mean that we run away from it and hide. Steiner talked about the merging of mankind in machine as an important and necessary issue for the future. Is then the transhumanists' golden age the seventh post-Atlantean cultural age, when birthing and deathing will have ended? I think it is. So this separation of the sheep and goats and the second fall that Steiner talks about is the happenings of the seventh cultural age. And then the moon returns to begin the sixth epoch, when we are no longer within the physical realm. And this is what Mystech is trying to address, trying to help all the world, but anthroposophy in particular, become aware of, so that we don't hide our heads in the sand, but actually become co-preparers of this future. And one of the things about this is developing a mechanical occultism meaning it's not seeable. And to do this, Steiner said, we are going to have a moral impulse, be able to direct a machine. How is that possible? Well, a moral impulse can only arise in the ego. It will stir the astral body. This is important because impulses can also arise from the astral. This stirring of the astral causes vibrations in the etheric, of which the physical resonates in the muscles. A machine should be able to be built with electricity and magnetism that also can resonate with the vibrations of the etheric body when it is nearby. But an immoral impulse will have a different signature to its vibrations, for it begins in the astral, not the ego. It likewise vibrates the etheric, but as I said, the signature of those vibrations will be different. But there will be human beings who will develop such machines that can operate on the immoral impulse. So here's a picture of this. And in this fifth epoch, we have to develop and fulfill tasks. And this is in part to become the 10th hierarchy when we complete the seventh epoch. But it is to be able in the sixth and seventh to begin to have our trial as angels. So when Christ said, "My kingdom is not of this world," it should lead us to say, "My kingdom too is not of this world." So there we have my presentation for our discussion. So I'm going to stop the sharing, and so we can all see each other. We're here, and open it up to your questions. So if you want to ask a question, we're a small enough group, just take yourself off of mute and go ahead and ask. If two people start at the same time, I'll pick one of you. So any thoughts or questions? I mean, it doesn't have to be a question, it could be a further thought. Don't be afraid. I know this was a lot of material, but maybe you have a question about ChatGPT. Like Carol. Come on, Carol, you had a question on that.
Well, I have a question about ChatGPT. Yes, but there's a larger question of are you going to talk about what our relationship to this ever increasing world of technology should be? How do we behave around it? What does it look like, including ChatGPT? Is that a good enough question?
Sure, that's a great question. And my surface level answer is that we see what it's coming, we see what has come, And it's our duty as Michaelic beings not to fight it, but to find the counterbalances. It is, in a sense, if you want to say, to awaken humanity to what we need to do to be able to have these technologies operate within humanity without bringing us to the war of all against all too soon, or without bringing us to full destruction of nature too soon. But that these destructions are in the future, and it would be wrong of us to try to bring about something that prevents them from ever happening. We must have the war of all against all. Sorry. And we must have the moon return, or we cannot properly fulfill the sixth epoch.
Well, meanwhile, here we are in the fifth age, and the big issue is climate change. And what we heard yesterday in the little course was you can't fight climate change through the government. And here I am, admiring Greta Thunberg and so on, and remembering Marjorie Spock. I don't know if you know about her, but she sued the US government for spraying DDT, and she lost, but she influenced Rachel Carson to start a movement which then did impact on government regulations. And so I'm left with many questions, as I say, about how to behave around all of these questions.
Right. Let me just correct one thing that you said, Carol. Marjorie Spock sued her local town and then the New York State. It wasn't the federal government. They were spraying DDT in those days, and they sprayed her farm. And she, had asked before, and they kept spraying. So she sued, and as you know, Rachel Carson was a journalist, very well-educated journalist, who came to and listened in on the trial, and that started her. But she and Marjorie had a lot of conversations.
Oh, they did, and we just read a long article about Marjorie Spock. I also talked to her while she was still alive, and
Good.
Both she and the article noted that the case somehow did go to the Supreme Court, and William O. Douglas was the sole dissenting voice and said, according to Marjorie, it was the most important case of the century.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, it did go all the way to the Supreme Court. And luckily she had a set of lawyers to carry her that far, and believed in her cause. And because of Marjorie being the mother of the environmental movement, we now have Greenpeace and all these other things which have done amazing things. Resistance in a way can have its good quality if it tries to show how we can deal with things, and to say this particular thing, like testing nuclear bombs, has this effect, and people come to realize, oh, it's going to kill us. Luckily, we had Rachel Carson write Silent Spring, and people got it, that by spraying DDT, the bird's eggs couldn't have a shell strong enough that when the mother brood upon the eggs to hatch them, she cracked all her eggs. And so she had no offspring. And hence we were destined for a silent spring of no birds. And what did it appeal to? It appealed to people's sympathies and antipathies. Oh no, no songbirds. But many people, and still today, I think we need a renewal of that in a way, because all my neighbors spray for mosquitoes. And in spraying for mosquitoes, we have no honeybees. And so all the honeybees that we ever see, they have to wait for about 3 or 4 days until a good rain has come before they return. And they come from probably quite some distance. I know a honeybee can fly up to 2 miles. So
in other words, you're saying you have to appeal with your soul to the feeling element, whether or not that involves the government. That is the point of departure to initiate some kind of change.
I didn't quite say it that way, but I can see why you might have thought I said it that way. Yes. What this Silent Spring did was to appeal not to the government's sympathies and antipathies, but to people.
Yes.
And we have to find ways that work for our time. And I wasn't there for that session that said just trying to get to passing laws. I mean, God bless you if you can get a law passed, but I think the real result won't be from a law, which will get watered down, but from human beings crying out, this is not the future we want. Now, we've got to find, though, these counterbalances, just as we're trying to find ways to counterbalance the carbon footprint. And we're trying to find, and come up with machines maybe that can take carbon out of the air, or, I hope we don't do this, but we have some scientists believing that we can spray nanoparticles in the upper atmosphere that will reflect some of the sunlight so that we don't develop as much heat from the sun, but it reflect maybe 10% of the sun. Problem is with these solutions is they've got to fit into life itself. So what is the bio rhythm? What is the lifespan if we spray the upper atmosphere? How do we get it out of it if it works too well and we start going into an ice age? And then there's a number of people who say, well, aren't we coming out of an ice age? Shouldn't things be warming up anyway? And aren't we going to get to the point where we enjoy this warmth just a little bit too much so that when the next ice age comes, we'll prevent it from happening? These are all questions that I would say, yeah, these are very good questions. But for me, most important question
downstairs.
is one of morality. Sorry, Charlene.
Someone's downstairs. Sorry.
Oh,
Someone's knocking at my door downstairs. I'm sorry.
I'll put you on mute. Yeah, so the question of morality is one. Barbara, you raise your hand. Would you like, come off of mute? Barbara, come off of mute.
I have so many questions, I don't even know where to start or even how to formulate them. But the first one that came, when you had that last diagram where our higher aspect can influence the next one, the astral, and then from there to the etheric, and then
Yes.
then the automaton. But and if we start with the highest, which involves the moral principle, how can an automaton, an automated non-being, you could say, be receptive to that? Because we as human beings, There's always something that happens and someone who can receive what happens. So there is always a dialogue. If we look at something in nature, that the moving of the leaves through the wind makes that we find beautiful. We are only able to find this beautiful if we have a receptacle for that. Does the automaton, how can that have a receptacle? How can this ever be influenced because it doesn't have a receptacle? So that was one question.
Sure.
Or am I wrong in thinking that it doesn't have it?
Let
And
me,
then the other one, just
let's take one at a time. Let's take one at a time. This is
Yeah.
the picture that you were referring to, I believe. And when I show this picture,
yeah, right.
up here, the ego is the I am in the human being. In Steiner's philosophy of freedom, he talks about how a true moral impulse can only arise from this ego.
Yes, absolutely. No,
Right.
I was referring to the other diagram, the one with just the lines.
Just a lion?
Lines. You had just had similar to this, but it was just line. No. At the bottom you had the automaton, and at the top you had, well, maybe it doesn't matter.
Oh,
Where is the
I'm looking to see if I can quickly find the one you mean that had, well, let me just put it this way.
okay. Okay.
Instead of going off looking and looking, let me stop share. Yeah, the Lucifer desires for us to become moral automatons and to not take up this freedom that we attained in the last 500 years.
Sorry, isn't that a contradiction? Morality cannot ever be
Oh, yes,
automated.
it can. When you say to yourself, I'm not going to do that because because the 10 commandments tell me not to, you're being a moral automaton.
Yeah, but I'm saying you don't have to do that. When you philosophy of freedom, yeah, I know what it's saying there. I can't see the connection with Lucifer.
Well, Lucifer, by taking us back, would take us back to the 10 commandments time before we really developed the ego. This was telling us what we have to do to
yes,
have an environment in which we can develop the ego.
Yeah, well, I was just, the way I thought of morality was that is the highest possible principle that you can work out of through thinking. And so so there can be stages of reaching that, which is maybe what this is all about.
So if you have this highest principle for humanity operating within you, you are within that realm that Steiner describes in the philosophy of freedom. Your thinking is intuitive thinking.
Yeah.
You are there with that. And so that's the kind of moral impulse he's talking about.
Yeah, that's right. So that can never be part of anything automated.
Oh, yes. What it can do is become something that vibrates in our etheric body, that moral impulse causing a vibration that, and Steiner describes this, he says, in a machine that's operating next to that person, that vibration, the machine can be specially tuned to resonate with that vibration. And because of it being a moral impulse, will know it to be a moral impulse, and therefore will do what you desire it to do.
Okay, somebody is programming that machine.
Yes.
Already in that realm. Oh yeah, okay.
What I haven't shown you is how that comes about. This is the work of Mistech, And in a lecture given in the, it's lecture 12 in the Reappearance of Christ in the Etheric, it's lecture 3 in Wrong and Right Use of Esoteric Knowledge, same lecture. He shows a diagram that shows Pisces and Virgo, and then Gemini and Sagittarius. And he said, those who will develop these moral machines will do so by working with the forces of morning and evening with that from Pisces and Virgo. And those will create these machines that will do no harm to human evolution. There will be others who will be motivated out of selfishness, who will understand how to develop such machines that will work out of any impulse, moral or immoral. And they will do harm to our human evolution, but they will come about. And they will use Sagittarius and Gemini in midday and midnight to develop those.
Is that Chat GPT?
Is that Chat GPT? At this point, I would say it's leaning in that direction, but it's not that yet. But what's interesting is, right now, it's not my voice, it's an electronic facsimile of my voice that you hear. What ChatGPT can do is also learn how my voice speaks, or how any recorded voice. So we could have Gopi Krishna Vijaya speaking to you right now out of ChatGPT. What we as human beings are being challenged to do is to, when a person is speaking to us, even over Zoom, is to move our consciousness into the etheric, where we are able to perceive each other's thinking. That etheric thinking has no spatial boundaries. It has at most some time boundary, but my voice is being delayed by a few seconds to you. And but you can still reach my thinking etherically with your thinking, even though you're spatially set apart. So ChatGPT is leaning us, all of AI is leaning us in that direction. When Ahriman incarnates, he'll certainly be able to take advantage of all of that and become as brilliant as all of human Ahrimanic intelligence has taken us. In one human being, he'll have all of that. But there will be no soul warmth in it. And so it behooves us human beings before Ahriman's incarnation to develop this soul warmth, to be able to recognize it in another human being. Am I being met by this gamut?
Can I ask something else?
Yes, sure. We have time.
Not really a question. It's just baffling, I find. I think you said throughout, especially at the beginning, no, throughout, that yes, all these things that we feel as being horrible that are going to happen, all these various incarnations and these various things leading us to the war all against all, we are to embrace all this and make it part of our striving to battle with them. And then opposite that, we are work in a conference that says that whose theme is that good may become. Well, just listening to that, for me, this is difficult to combine all this. That good may become, and yet we are embracing all of these things that lead to the war of all against all, which is desirable. We need it in order to progress. To me, this feels like a contradiction, but I'm sure
Yes.
somewhere it isn't. And then meanwhile, while we are happily on the earth right now, we are doing our darndest, some people are doing their darndest to save things from developing the ways they're supposed to develop, by saving the animals, by saving the plants, by going BD instead of pesticides, etc. So we're doing our darndest to prevent all these negatives from happening. And that seems like another contradiction.
It does, doesn't it? And this is one of the amazing things about Steiner, is he seems full of contradictions until you go to the spiritual level. In the physical, it's full of contradictions. And so, yes, we should be taking care of Mother Earth. Mother Earth, who is getting old, Mother Earth, who is now well into her 80s or 90s. And
Yeah.
what do you do with her? You try to bring her the best you can. You bring her what she can so that she doesn't die tomorrow.
Why not?
Why not? Because it's not, then we would be either diverged right into Lucifer or Ahriman. We would not go into the Christ. The Christ is there in the etheric showing us the way, but we must try to love the earth as much as possible so that as much of humanity goes with us, assuming you are going where the Christ is going. But Christ will be there helping us prepare. We can't make that ascension until Christ's time visible in the etheric is coming to an end. How many more lifetimes is that for you? And I started out saying, you've got 4 to 6, but you need to make those 4 to 6 as loving as possible for thy neighbor, which includes the animal kingdom. They were once part of us.
Yes, we call them our brothers. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we pushed them out, so to speak, in order to be able to step ahead. And likewise, when the second fall occurs, in a way, by our ascension, how do we get up? We have to push down on the physical. And unfortunately, by our own ascension, which is necessary, not only for us and our evolution, but for human evolution. If we do it for ourselves, we say, I'm going to ascend. Nope, you're not the material that the gods want. But if you ascend for the benefit of all those who have not yet ascended, you turn around and in your love for them, you want to bring them up. That is what is worthy of ascension. Yes, Carol's husband.
Yes. One thing that I still do as I'm not a class teacher anymore, as a teacher, is I tell stories about gnomes to grade 1.
Yes.
And when we were during COVID and we went online, I was asked if I could tell stories to the grade 1 students over the internet. And I said at the time, I didn't think that I could because I could not feel them.
The children.
The children. When I tell stories, the same stories I tell every year, but they're different every time I tell them because I'm with them in person.
Yep.
And I wonder if, from what I heard, it could have been simply my weakness that I felt I couldn't do that I couldn't have my warmth go through the wire, as you might say. I said it would be better for I wrote them down for their teacher, and then she read them to the students. Do you follow my question?
Mm-hmm.
That was how I dealt with it. As soon as they were written, I found them like concrete. They were more literary. They weren't the same thing. But her warmth came over, I think. My question is, was it my lack of strength that I didn't feel that I could carry them across through this machine that we're talking through? right now, my warmth, because that is what they feel in the classroom. Is that
When
it?
COVID came out and this started, it wasn't your lack of strength, because to have that strength, we need to be here. We need to be doing this much more to build up. How do we project warmth
Yes.
to you? We didn't know how to do that then. And
No.
we still don't know how to do it yet. It's not there yet.
So it was correct in a sense.
So
when
you
I-
were correct in what you did.
Right.
And you also know, as a class teacher and all, that there's a huge difference for the child, just as there is for this audience, when I'm reading my text or you're up in front reading from the book. It's a
It's not-
very different experience.
Yes,
You know the story and you're telling it out of your soul life.
exactly.
Yeah. And that's a similar analogy. That's what we've got to achieve here.
We have to get to the place where we could do it.
Yeah,
That's what you're saying. Yes, I hear you.
right. And that is a kind of etheric development which we haven't got to yet.
Right.
So the physical is happening on the physical, but it's keying us in. It's pointing us to where we find each other in the etheric.
Right.
What is Gamut? It's soul, right?
It's soul. It's warmth. It is this
Gemüt, Gemüt.
Right,
sending warmth from me to the classroom. That's what I always talk about. Yes.
right.
So, okay.
This is tough going. This is all new stuff. This is the
New.
new series.
Carol, did you?
So can I add to that how
Yes.
I'm hearing this? There are three words that come to mind. One is transformation, one is redemption, and one is compromise. We're told that our job is not to push Ahriman away, but to redeem him. And so that becomes the question of the hour. What does that look like when you're redeeming him? And when I think about this, I think about, gardening in a time of, well, whatever. But also during the pandemic, as you've just heard, our school went online. And of course, not everybody liked that. And some people were very critical of even doing this at all. But we sort of kept things together, and it was like a big compromise. And our study group went online, and some people were appalled by this, but on the other hand, we had perfect attendance and no snow days, and something happened that was good, I think. And so what we're left with all of this technology is trying to use it a way that something comes out of it that's good, and not becoming an automaton in the process, and not becoming somebody who spends their life on their cell phone in the process. And I think it's a very delicate dance, and it leads me back to this old concept we used to talk about of das Werdende, the becoming. There's always Lucifer on one end and Ahriman on the other, and it's where you are is always in motion. You're always going a little too far in one direction or a little too far in the other direction. I mean, a teacher told us years ago that at the end of the day, he might feel, oh, I really taught that well. Or he might feel, oh, that was terrible. I'll never go back in the classroom again. And he had both of those feelings, but really the real part was somewhere in the middle, and it was always in motion. It was never fixed. That's the thing about Lucifer and Ahriman, they're fixed. And when you're in the middle, you're always asking questions and saying, am I doing this right? I don't know. I really don't know. I'm asking questions. I guess that's what you've said, how that lands with me. And I'm not sure if that's what you've been leading to, but I'll let you speak now.
Well, I'll just make it quick because we have to stop in 1 minute, I guess.
Oh,
You form is the spirits of form, the Elohim, the Exousiai. If you want to transform, you need the Christ to do
right.
it. And where is the Christ? Between Lucifer and Ahriman in us. And you're absolutely right. It's not a static polarity there. It's dancing with polarities. It's constantly in motion. And you know, so redemption is something that Mani, M-A-N-I, the Manichaeist took on. They will complete that when on Jupiter, the next planetary condition, it is recapitulating Earth. And that is the time when we will bring about the redemption. And that path of Mani can be really awful sounding, because when that second fall of the Ahrimanic double and some portion of humanity happens, there will be initiates, Manichaeist initiates that will go with them. And you may have heard of the eighth sphere and all this kind of stuff, the anthroposophical hell. That maybe this is, where they're all going to go and hang out on the moon for Jupiter until their redemption time, when Jupiter recapitulates Earth, could happen. So it's very interesting. I don't know if that moon, the eighth sphere, will collide with that future Jupiter, or what is that future Jupiter. But we are going to have to be angels to enter the bodies of those Jupiter humans. Who are those Jupiter humans? Where are they? They're coming from below through Ahriman's realm into our world now. What kind of bodies will they have? It's not physical bodies. Physical belongs to Earth. What goes beyond physical? We've come down, right? We've come down from gaseous beings to liquid beings to solid beings. What's next? Won't those bodies be what we might say enmeshed in subnature, or something we don't even know yet? But we will have to enter those bodies in order to be able to help steer them. Wow.
Well,
Wow, that's pretty challenging. And so that's why in the seventh cultural age, before we leave the physical behind, we're going to have an opportunity to enter into bodies that might be like those bodies on future Jupiter. And those Ahrimanic beings have the task of retaining all that we develop and learn about physical bodies and sub-nature bodies. So the redemption of Ahriman is a cosmic activity. Ahriman, by being brought into human evolution, was brought in by the Kyriates, and it is a cosmic event, just as Golgotha was a cosmic event for them to learn about learn about birth and death, the gods. And in the future, we will teach the gods how to overcome evil, the evil of Ahriman.
Out of freedom, presumably.
Sorry?
The whole purpose of this huge game is so that the divine world can learn freedom, I thought. Seems like a
Yes,
huge effort.
they are learning freedom through us. And that freedom,
yes.
And
right.
it's a huge game. It's incredible.
Yes, isn't
I
it?
sometimes ask myself, wouldn't it be easier if you wanted to become spiritual? Why did we do all this? Why did we have to do all this? So that the divine world can experience freedom?
Yes.
What is the highest principle? Freedom? No, it is love.
Oh.
Oh, gosh.
It's
Well,
when
never
you
mind.
bring those two words, those two concepts together, love and freedom,
Yeah.
become one with our goal. We have to stop, folks. We're 4 minutes late. Charlene, do you have anything you want to bring a closure to? And I will send this recording to you,
Thank you.
Charlene. I'll send a link to it and then
They want it.
move it to wherever you need to for this. Oh.
That's great. Thank you so much. It's a lot to think about. So I I appreciate everybody's questions, and I feel like I'm just having questions beginning, from thinking about all that. And yeah, I hope we can talk again and explore it further. And
Yeah, it's a tough subject. It needs to be looked at over and over again before it
mhm.
sinks in. And Barbara, your question is my topic for the next Front Range Anthroposophical Cafe. Have you heard of those?
Where's the cafe?
It's online.
Oh,
Comes out of Boulder, Colorado.
and it's called what? Anthroposophical Cafe?
Yeah, Front Range
Front.
Anthroposophical Cafe.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Okay.
I'm
Front.
being
R-O-N-T.
Andrew, if you would like, when you send the link, you could send some information about the cafe, and I'll include that with
Oh, sure.
with the recording, so that if people want to pursue that further after they listen to the recording, then they would have that link in there.
One other little plug. We just finished the Mistech conference while this festival was going on, and its topic was cymatics. And can we learn from cymatics, cymatics? It was founded by an anthroposophist, worked in Dornach. His name is Hans Jenny, in English we would say, Hans Jenny, Jenny. And he founded this whole form of how to make visible the invisible. How do we see the forms that are invisible, that happen in music, in sound, in singing, and everything is vibrating? How do we make that visible so we can see it? And that's cymatics. Now the question is, can we take that into a machine so it can see the vibrations of the human being nearby?
Wow.
As you said that, I was thinking that maybe we're seeing it not with eyes, so we're sensing those vibrations.
Yes, yes, that is correct. We see it etherically, but we can't be there in our consciousness. Our consciousness is down here in the physical. So
Mhm.
we can make it visible. That'll help be a bridge so that we can bring that consciousness into the etheric.
Mhm.
Well, so thank you all. This is
Cool.
wonderful. And back to the festival. Yes.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you all.
And
Bye-bye.
Andrew, thank you for hosting this
Yeah,
and for coming again today.
you're all
Really
welcome.
appreciate
Bye-bye
it.
for now. Bye now.
I